Part 2, Chapter 2, Herod, future king of the Jews. It was in the December of 43 B.C., about the time of the Festival of Lights, that Cassius, the lean and hungry one, was leaving Palestine, taking with him many chests of gold. By taxing the Jews and demanding gold from the temple treasury, he had been gathering funds for the war against Antony and Octavian. "You have served us well thus far," said Cassius, bidding farewell to the young governor of Galilee, whom he had found most obliging. And no wonder. This young governor was Herod, the same Herod who, years hence, it is said, was to be visited by 3 wise men from the east who were following a star. Naturally keen and crafty as a fox, young Herod had also been well trained by his father to help the most powerful Roman of the day, no matter who he was, when he arrived in Palestine. And why not? All the power Herod's father held in this kingdom of the Jews depended upon the Romans who controlled the country. For Herod's father was not a native of Palestine. He had come up to Jerusalem from Edom, the country to the south. So the pious Jews looked upon him as a foreigner. They hated him as they did all foreigners, and they resented the fact that he held power in their country that should have belonged to their own high priest. Among the Jews, who had no other law but the law of their religion, the office of the high priest was similar to that of a king. But Hyrcanus, who was now the high priest, had no power left to him at all, outside of the temple. The actual rule of the country had been taken away from him by the Romans when they conquered the country, and given to Herod's father. That had been his reward for being shrewd and quick to furnish the Roman general with gold as soon as he arrived, and to help him bombard and conquer Jerusalem, enter the city, and establish their authority. That had been 20 years ago, and during that stormy time Herod, who was then 11, had been left with his grandfather in Arabia. For while his father came from Edom, Herod's mother was an Arabian princess. There, where sandy waste and fertile pastures met, the boy had learned to hunt and fight and ride high-spirited steeds like any son of the desert. He had come to Jerusalem a strong boy with a sinewy body, as quick and agile as his mind. A prophet, seeing how keen and daring he was, is said to have predicted that Herod would one day be king of the Jews. "You do not believe," said the old man, who had observed the boy's shrewd black eyes narrowing in doubt. "You have been told that no one who is not descended from King David will ever be called king by the Jews. But mark well my words, for I, an old seer of the Essenes, can foresee your destiny." When he was 25, Herod's father had given him the northern province of Galilee to govern. There Herod had found his first opportunity to gain the friendship of the Romans, on his own account. But in doing so, Herod had also earned the everlasting hatred of the Jews. Galilee was a rich, fertile province, but a troublesome one in which rebellion against Rome was always breaking out. There, in Galilee, were to be found many hot-headed young patriots, so full of zeal to make their country independent that they were always ready to snatch up their daggers and follow almost any new leader in an uprising against the Romans. At that particular time, one of those outlaw patriots, a sort of Robin Hood, was captain of a band of rebels who had become the terror of the countryside. Roman travelers and merchants carrying their goods along the ancient highway running north from Egypt were in constant fear of being held up and robbed when they went through Galilee. Roman legions never knew when the robbers might rush from their hiding places down upon their camps to raid and plunder them. Herod had gone after these outlaws of Galilee, hunted them down in the hills, tracked them to their caves among the rocks, and then killed their leaders. By doing that, Herod had defied the law, and the whole Jewish nation was aroused. Only the Sanhedrin, only that body of 71 men, the supreme court of the nation, had the right to condemn any man to death. An angry mob stormed the palace of Hyrcanus and demanded that Herod himself, that tool of the Romans who had taken the law into his own hands, be summoned before the Sanhedrin to be tried for murder and condemned. Hyrcanus, who, as high priest, was president of this Supreme Court of Justice, had hesitated. By nature mild and uncertain, he also did not wish to offend the Romans and endanger his comfortable position. Trembling, therefore, between the wrath of the Romans and the fury of the Jews, it was with great hesitation that he finally sent the summons to young Herod. Herod, high in favor with the Romans, had answered the summons boldly, bringing a company of Roman soldiers with him to Jerusalem. Into the hall of hewn stones he had marched, with clanking sword and polished armor, and flaunting a purple cape. Before those 70 old men, a man on trial was expected to appear with disheveled hair, clad in the black robe of a penitent. Herod's arrogance shocked and reduced them to silence. Only one among them was brave enough to speak. He was a Pharisee. Most of the 70 others who made up the Sanhedrin at this time were Sadducees, wealthy, worldly, hard-eyed princes of the land who were more interested in protecting their riches and their high position than in defending the rights of those low-born, noisy rebels of Galilee whose leader had been killed. But this old man who rose to speak was a Pharisee, and he was devoted to the law. For the Pharisees were students and Puritans. They were continually studying the law of Moses and searching it diligently for righteousness. "You, members of this court, who are judges with me," cried the Pharisee, "God is great, and his law is greatly to be feared. If you absolve this guilty man who now stands before us, armed, as if daring us to find him guilty, he will one day return to punish you, all of you, and your high priest as well." Hyrcanus trembled at the words. Looking about the circle of elders, he had seen that they too had been stirred. Not daring to take a vote for fear that this young friend of the Romans might possibly be condemned, he had weakly dismissed the court and left Herod free to escape. This affair in Galilee had occurred in the days when Julius Caesar was all-powerful in the Roman world. Soon Herod learned that Caesar had been killed, and his enemy Cassius had arrived in Palestine. Cassius, scratching and scraping together all the gold within reach of his lean and hungry fingers, had found 4 cities of Syria unable to meet with his demands, and had therefore sold all the inhabitants into slavery, an unfortunate but not unusual way of raising money in this age of wholesale slavery. In Galilee, there had been no need to resort to such means, for here Cassius had found this most capable and obliging young governor, named Herod, who had rounded up the required taxes in short order and delivered them promptly. Therefore, on that December day, before leaving Palestine to meet Brutus in Asia Minor, Cassius was assuring Herod that he would be well rewarded for his services. "Continue to serve us well," he was saying, "and when this war is over, I will make you king of Judea." Cassius spoke with confidence, but Herod's black eyes looked narrow and suspicious. When the war was over, would it be Cassius, he was thinking, or some other Roman who held the power in Palestine? No matter. Whoever the most powerful Roman of that day might be, he, Herod, would be on hand to prove himself a friend.